Hello there, students. Welcome to this presentation. This is Luis Silva, and today we're going to be looking at the foundation of the American government and obviously the ideas of democracy. What will we learn today? Four different things. First, what is government? Second, which form of government is best? Third, why did government originate? And lastly, what are the functions of government? The origins of democracy. If we go back in history, the idea of democracy has been in place for thousands of years. And concepts such as politics, democracy, and republic are very old because they go back all the way to the ancient Greeks, starting with the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who was one of the first individuals to actually study government. Now, what is a state? Well, you hear the word state everywhere. In this case, we have 50 states in the United States. And a state is a political community that occupies a definite territory and has an organized government. It has the power to make and enforce laws without approval from any higher authority. In our country, the United States, we have 50 states, and all of those states can actually or have an organized government, and they also have the power to make and enforce laws without getting permission from the federal government. What is a nation? Well, a nation is a group of people united by bonds of race, language, custom, tradition, and sometimes religion. In the United States, again, we have people from everywhere. We have people from all over the world. But in a way, the dominant culture here in the United States becomes part of everybody, and that unites us. On top of that, even though we do not have an official language, we have English basically that is used everywhere. And this is very important because despite the fact that many immigrants come with different traditions, different customs, they find a way to become part of the, I would say, this dominant culture here in the United States. What is a nation state? Well, you have a map right here of the United States. This is a nation state. We have 50 states that make up this great nation, and the United States itself and other nations such as France are examples of nation state. And a nation state is a country in which both the nation and the state coincide. They work together. The federal government, which is the national government, works together to bring about change, bring about different things for the entire country. Now, some of the essential features of a state are four. First is population. You need people, obviously, to make a country or to have a country. You need a territory for those people. Sovereignty. And at the end, you obviously need a government, which is what we're looking at today. Now, some of the territorial boundaries of the U.S. As you know from studying U.S. history, the United States slowly but surely was able to expand from the East Coast to the West Coast. And some of those expansions included, obviously, wars such as the Mexican-American War that basically gave the United States most of Texas and California and many other states there. You have obviously the original 13 colonies. You have the Treaty of Paris that basically proved to be a big treaty as the U.S. was able to acquire more lands. You have the Louisiana Purchase. You have the Gadsden Purchase and the Alaskan Purchase. And when you combine all of this, you get 50 states, which is what we have today as the United States of America. Now, in terms of states, every state obviously has to have some type of control, sovereignty. And here in the United States, all of the states, like I mentioned before, they have the power to actually do and pass laws and enforce laws. So in a way, these states are independent. They create their own laws for the people that live in those states. Now, political sovereignty means that the state has the supreme and absolute authority within its boundaries. For example, Texas cannot, come and tell New Mexico, this is how you're supposed to run your things. And New Mexico can't come to California and tell California, hey, you need to run your things this way. This is obviously, or gives the idea of sovereignty, meaning that each state can actually do whatever they feel is necessary that will benefit the people within their own boundaries. Now, what is government? Since we're talking about government, this is a class about government. Well, government is the institution through which the state maintains social order, provides public services, and enforces decisions that are binding on all people living within the state. So that is a government, basically. You have here in our country, we have a government that's actually made up of 3 different branches. You have the legislative, which creates laws. You have the executive, which enforces the law, that being the president. And you have the judicial branch, which interprets the law. Now, the U.S. Constitution and limited government. The ideas of limited government shape the constitutional government of the United States. This is really important because the Constitution actually limits what the president can do, limits what the Congress can do, and it limits what the U.S. Supreme Court or the judicial system can do. So we have in our political system a limited government. And obviously, in the case of voting, if we do not like the way a president is acting, we just vote for another president. If we do not like the way our senator is behaving, well, guess what? When the time comes to for re-election, we vote for another senator. And this is how we limit our government. We do not let our government become too powerful. The United States Constitution and the founding fathers were very smart, and they did not want to give full authority to a government. So what they did is or a lot of those founding fathers, they used to read a whole bunch of material from the Enlightenment writers. And one of the biggest contributor to the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence was a gentleman known as John Locke. John Locke actually said that people were endowed with the right of life, liberty, and property. To keep these rights, people willingly contracted to give power to the government. When the government failed to preserve those rights of the people had the right to break that contract. In other words, the people had the right to overthrow the government. So he was extremely influential in limiting or the ideas, or putting together the ideas of a limited form of government. And here you have another very important writing that was done by Mr. Locke. And Mr. Locke obviously exemplified the ideas of natural rights, contract theory, civil society, and he basically gave the power to the people. He said that, the people are the ones who put the government in place, and the people can actually take away or remove that government. Another very important, in this case, Enlightenment thinker that influenced the writings of the U.S. Constitution was Montesquieu. Montesquieu is very famous because he actually brought one of the biggest concepts in the U.S. Constitution, and that is the separation of powers. Again, let me repeat that. We have in our U.S. Constitution 3 parts of government: the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branch. Now, the purpose of the U.S. government. Well, fairly simple. We're going to have 4 different points. 1 is to maintain social order. 2 is to provide public services. 3, to provide for national security and the common defense. And lastly, to provide and control the economic system. Government must take decisions that are binding to all citizens. It has the authority to require all individuals to obey these decisions and the power to punish those who do not obey them. So this is basically the purpose of government. Fairly simple. Is there to make sure that everything works well for society. Now, the foundation of U.S. democracy. Governments range in size and type. Most large countries have several levels of government. We have national, we have state, and we have a local level. This is exactly the way that our government here in the United States functions. We have a national government. In this case, we have Mr. Donald Trump. He's part of the national government. And obviously the Congress is part of the national government. And the court system is part of the national government. And then you have state governments. You have a state governor. You have a state that's, well, the government itself is like the president of that particular state. And then you have local authorities, local governments, like the mayor of Los Angeles, and so on. Now, looking on, a unitary system gives all key powers to a national or central government. The central government can still set up other local or state governments. China is an example of a unitary government, which is completely different than what we have here in the United States. Again, our government here in the United States is made up of a national government, is made up of a state government, and is made up of local governments. Now, the U.S. federal system. The federal system divides the power of government between the national government and state and provincial governments. Each state has sovereignty in some areas. The U.S. is a perfect example of a federal system in which you have the central government, and underneath that you have state governments. And this is how the federal system works here in the United States. That's what we actually call the federal government. We say the federal government. The U.S. Constitution, as you know, was written in the founding fathers had a specific purpose. They had a vision. They had a clear path as to the way that they wanted the new country to evolve over time. But what is a constitution? A constitution is a plan that provides the rules for government. It has 3 purposes. 1, it sets out ideals that the people bound by the Constitution believe in and share. 2, it establishes the basic structure of government and defines the government's power and duties. And lastly, it provides the supreme law of the country. That's why we say the supreme law of the land. That's why we have deep respect for the Constitution, because it is the founding document of the United States of America. Now, the Constitution limits government. A constitutional government refers to a government in which a constitution has authority to place clearly recognized limits on the power of those who are ruling. Constitutional government is basically a limited government. Continuing on with the Constitution, in this case, constitutions are incomplete for 2 reasons. First, no written constitution can spell out all the laws, customs, and ideas that grow around the document itself. And secondly, it does not reflect the cultural practice of government in a country. The main body sets out the plan for government, in this case of the Constitution. It describes the relationship between the national and state governments, and it is divided into articles and sections, just like we have here in the United States Constitution. The Constitution provides the supreme law of the land. By the way, our Congress, our president, our court system, all know and respect the Constitution, as they know that it is like the guiding principle of everything that goes on in the country. Now, the purpose of the preamble of the U.S. Constitution. The preamble of the U.S. Constitution is basically a brief introductory statement of the Constitution. The fundamental purpose in guiding principles. It states in general terms, and courts have referred to it as a reliable evidence of the Founding Fathers' intentions regarding the Constitution's meaning and what they hoped the Constitution would achieve. Now, the types of government. This is really important because it's important because this is how we view our government, and it serves us as a guiding force in order to make the best decisions when it comes to our government. So all governments belong to one of the three major groups. Number one is aristocracy, which is ruled by one person. Number two is oligarchy, ruled by a few person. Or number three, democracy, ruled by many, just like in our country. So we're not number one, we're number two, but we are number three, in this case, a democracy, a country that's set up by democratic principles. Now, what is a monarchy? Well, a monarchy is a form of government where a king, queen, or emperor exercise the supreme power of the government. And we have many examples throughout history, as many countries actually had kings and queens. Now, absolute monarchs have complete and unlimited power to rule. A constitutional monarchs share power with elected legislature and serve as ceremonial leaders. But in this case, a monarchy, we still have a monarchy, for example, in Great Britain up to this date, but the monarchy does not have like a lot of power. It's more of a representation of what the king or queen used to be hundreds of years ago. Now, what is an oligarchy? Well, an oligarchy is a system of government in which a small group holds power. Power comes from wealth, military power, social position, or a combination of these elements. We do have a whole bunch of governments in the world that are dominated in one family controls the entire government, and they decide what to do within that country. Now, what is a democracy? And we talk about democracy so much. Our country is a democracy. But what is a democracy? A democracy is any system of government in which rule is by the people. In other words, we vote and we put people in power. A key to democracy is that the people hold the power. Now, direct democracy, what is it? Well, direct democracy is the people basically govern themselves by voting on different issues, and individual citizens go and cast their vote in order to vote for different people, vote for different things that may be coming up, different regulations. A representative democracy is basically the people elect representatives and give them the power to make laws and run government. And that is what we have here in the United States, a representative democracy in which you get to vote in order to elect the next House or congressman or senator or governor or the president. So this is what we have. We're not necessarily a direct democracy because we, up to a certain degree, we do not, vote for anything that's really big, but we elect people that would make those decisions and do make those decisions for us. And that is basically our Congress. What is a political party? A political party is a group of individuals with broad common interests who organize to nominate candidates for office, win elections, and determine public policy. That is a political party. And in this country, the United States, we have two big political parties. We have the Democrats and we have the Republicans. Those are the two parties that have dominated our political life for hundreds of years up to this point. And they play a significant role in our political system, as they are the ones who basically bring out different topics, bring out different issues to the public, and they're powerful groups of people. In terms of economic decisions, government has three major economic decisions to make. First, providing citizens with economic opportunities. It's really important. The government have to negotiate trade agreements in order to provide people with economic opportunities. They have to provide a public system of education to provide people with an opportunity to become like engineers, like doctors and teachers. Secondly, the government has the responsibility or decisions to make to pass laws that shape the economic environment of the nation. And lastly, the government has to make choices that distribute public services and benefits among citizens. It is the duty of the government to make sure that, for example, you have something that you can sustain yourself with after you hit like 65 years old, or Social Security, even though it's not a lot, but it's still a government program that provides for people that can no longer work. Now, what is capitalism? Capitalism is an economic system providing free choices for individuals. In this case, capitalism can be defined as an economic system that provides free choice and individual incentive for workers, investors, consumers, and business enterprises. Now, since we're talking about capitalism, we also have to talk about a free market. What is a free market? It's basically an economic system in which buyers and sellers make free choices in the marketplace. And this is what we have here in the United States. We have an economic system that is known as capitalism, and also as a free market enterprise, because people are able to use their resources in order to purchase different stuff, in order to come up with ideas about different businesses or create a business. And this is capitalism at its best. And also, there is very little government interference. Now, since we just finished talking about capitalism, what is socialism? Socialism is an economic system where the government owns the basic means of production, distributes products and wages, and provides social services such as healthcare and welfare. Now, some people may say that, socialism is a very bad thing. Well, not really, because we have in our country, for example, the fact that people get Social Security, that can be considered a socialist idea. The fact that we provide in our country free public education for our kids, that is a socialist idea. So not everything that socialism implies is a bad thing for our country. I just gave you two examples of socialist ideas that work well within our country. One of the biggest promoters of socialism is Karl Marx. He was a German philosopher, and he actually came up with the ideas of communism. He actually wrote the Communist Manifesto, and he said that eventually capitalism will inevitably produce internal tensions which will lead to its destruction. He believes socialism will replace capitalism and lead to a stateless, classless society called pure communism. Well, guess what? It hasn't worked that way. And I don't think it will work that way because obviously capitalism has worked so well for everybody. Now, what is communism? Communism is a political and economic philosophy that believes that one class would evolve, property would be held in common, and there would be no need for government. Well, again, we have seen throughout history that communism has not worked. Communism has been, an idea that many have tried to use in order to take power over different countries, but at the end of the day, it has not produced the results. Now, communism and command economy. In communist countries, government planners decide how much to produce, what to produce, how to distribute the goods and services provided, and how much to charge for these goods and services. This is obviously a command economy in which the government is basically dictating and saying everything that will happen in the economy. They will say what needs to be produced. They will say how to produce it. And, they will actually set up the prices for everything that's produced. In a way, this limits people from becoming wealthy. This limits people from generating profits. And obviously, it has not worked also. Now, some of the functions of the U.S. government are: first, form a more perfect union. Secondly, establish justice. Thirdly, ensure domestic tranquility. Fourthly, provide for the common defense. Fifth, promote the general welfare. 6, secure the blessings of liberty. And obviously, those are very important concepts that we cannot forget about. Now, before we finish the presentation, I do want to go over some of the important components of our U.S. government. In terms of structure and institution, the United States has a president, the Congress, and the Supreme Court. They represent the 3 branches of government. The United States has a representative democracy, or a republic. The United States has a strong central government, but states also have many powers to rule day-to-day activities. Some of the important documents of the United States include: first, the U.S. Constitution, as it's the foundation of the U.S. government. Second, we have the Declaration of Independence, which is a very important document which brought about the ideas of freedom and equality. And we also have the Articles of Confederation, which created the first government of the United States. Some of the guiding principles: Americans believe strongly in limited government. Limited government protects individual liberties such as religious freedoms, equality, and justice. Many Americans believe in individualism and entrepreneurship. And Americans believe in government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Americans promote democracy all around the world. This is something very important because a lot of the countries around the world have actually copied similar political systems as in the United States. Well, this ends our presentation. I hope that you learned from it, and I hope that this presentation will help you answer many of your questions that you may have about the way that our government works and the way that the United States has become, or became since its founding days, a democracy. If you learned from this presentation, please make sure to subscribe. Thank you, and I will talk to you soon.